it all out, I guess, if you can. Brenden Nunes, Sactown Sports Kings insider. Brenden, you were there. I kind of didn't believe what I saw. How about you with the close of that game?
Yeah, same thing. I couldn't help but really laugh at the end. I guess it's kind of my go-to when things are that level of crazy or just new and absurd way to manage to lose a basketball game, but it somehow, I don't know, with about 6 minutes left in that game, I feel like you could sort of feel it coming that it was going to be a close game and they had a chance to potentially blow what was once that 19-point lead. I think it was 14 going into the fourth quarter, and did it in about the ugliest way possible.
Yeah, I was saying this earlier in the show. We should point out, by the way, Brenden will be in a little bit later for Crosstalk in the last segment of Friday Fun and Games, and then you're filling in today, so you got a big day today filling in for Alan Stiles. But I was saying this, Brenden, that the way it was going, I was really happy with the way the Kings played, and I thought, man, this is too bad because they're going to win, but it might be like a 4-point win, and it won't look as good, but at this point, it doesn't matter. This team just needs a win, and it just kept getting closer and closer, and I still cannot believe the way it finished, and I think a lot of what I've seen on reaction from people, what they're bothered by a lot, is kind of some of the post game reaction, excuse me. And I know you were in there for Mike Brown and De'Aaron Fox. That was as short as I've ever heard De'Aaron with any kind of post-game reaction.
Yeah, I will say I feel like there's been times in the past I remember a comment from, I don't know, it's got to be 4 years ago, definitely prior to being team, where he said something along the lines of like, what does it matter? It's not like we're in the playoffs anyways. I don't think it's representative of him not caring. I think that he's a player that definitely does. I think that he's more so, it doesn't matter what I tell you guys. Mm-hmm. And we don't know if there was a sense of accountability that he held to his teammates behind closed doors. I would be surprised if Mike Brown didn't express his message in that way to De'Aaron right before that moment. So maybe that contributed to it. But yeah, I mean, I think that in a way is De'Aaron showing his frustration, but I think comments that I ended up agreeing with most were with De'Aaron saying, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to help. I think that's true, but I think there was something he could say that would make it feel a little bit worse for Kings fans, and I think he did kind of manage to do that.
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, my personal preference, again, I can't tell him what to do. He's going to do it. You got to be authentic to yourself. Sometimes there's owning it. Like, look, he made a mistake. He did. It does happen. He's not the only one ever to do it. And he'll make more and others will make more. But, to kind of put it more on himself, saying, guys, like that last play, I that's on me. I'll try never to let that happen again. That's something I would have liked to have heard. But again, I'm not going to, take that with me and put that as any long-term fault on Fox. But I found it interesting too, Brenden, that, Mike Brown, I feel like has either praised or called out De'Aaron a little bit more lately, like asking for more in leadership, in performance. And last night, he didn't really hide from it, basically saying he just wanted to see it again, why De'Aaron wasn't on his man at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it's an obvious blunder, and Mike Brown will always talk about how he sort of follows the Popovich line of thinking when it comes to the level of accountability and the way that he goes about holding his players accountable. And it's starting at the top, always says that Tim Duncan was going to get chewed out more than anybody. And if he was going to take it, everybody else was going to have to fall in line. And I'm pretty sure Mike Brown has, I feel like, expressed that he thinks that De'Aaron Fox is sort of top of the totem pole in Sacramento, the 1A on this team that should be setting the tone. And he holds him to that standard accordingly. So I think that's understandable, but it's, does a little bit feel like a response to maybe some of the recent comments that came out in the Athletic article or when he was on the Draymond Green show of, is it the chicken or the egg here? Like, the team needs to have better surrounding talent for you, but also if you were a little bit better, De'Aaron, that this would also be a different situation. And I feel like both can be true. And I feel like we've seen Mike Brown challenge De'Aaron to, also try to play his part in eventually bouncing this back. And Mike Brown's in a tough spot right now as well. I mean, at this point, I feel like it kind of seems like anything could happen, and you don't know whose job is going to be on the line. But obviously, the way that this season has been, and as disappointing as it has up to this point, I kind of feel like everybody's playing for a job, coaching for a job, or maybe trying to make trades for a job from the general management standpoint. And so I feel like it is a little bit of a response to what De'Aaron maybe had been publicly saying, rather directly or through his agent, but also kind of par for the course with Mike Brown and De'Aaron.
Yeah, it feels like everybody's on edge, and understandably. I mean, Brenden, this homestand's been absolutely awful. I mean, the sandwich games here of the first one with Denver, where they, very similar to last night, where they had a 10-point lead with 4 minutes to go. Last night, 10-point lead with less time and couldn't close it out. And in between, some bad performance against the Lakers and an awful game against Indiana. It just, I mean, I know the next thing is the Lakers again, but I mean, and all they could do is just go at it another time. And it just, I feel like last night felt like one of the worst losses that I can remember in recent memory.
I really thought midway through that second quarter, or towards the end of it, even through most of that third quarter, that they were playing one of their better games. You know, it was a high-scoring first quarter on both sides, but I thought defensively the Kings played really well in that second and third quarter, and I was expecting a cheery Mike Brown. You know, I thought he changed the rotation a lot. Keon Ellis was coming in for Malik Monk at the 3-minute mark, and then you're almost getting back to that Malik Monk super sub role, you know, DeMar DeRozan running the show of the second unit, and now you got De'Aaron and Malik playing together again. I was so intrigued by all the rotational stuff, and that just goes totally out the window because how this game ended and fallen to 5 straight, obviously, 13 and 18, 12th in the Western Conference, and you're getting further and further from what was that crowded group that you were kind of part of from 4 to 11. And you're finding new ways to do it every time, it feels like. But there's always a stretch of just a lack of engagement, a lack of energy, and De'Aaron is you know, not blameless in it, and I don't think any player really is. So it's tough on these moments. I'm sure you feel the same, Jason, where it kind of just overshadows everything else. But it's hard for it not to, because a blunder of that extent, and then obviously the way that it was talked about post game, I mean, yeah, it's going to steal the show.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, for this team to be going through this right now, I'm with you, Brenden, because I think even while this has kind of been in this rut they've been in, I thought the one silver lining was that they were kind of still close enough with the pack. You know, that OKC, Houston group, Memphis, they're kind of extending themselves, but that rest of the squads, you know, Warriors are going through it. Lakers are going through it. Nobody's playing great, but the Kings have just blown this opportunity with this homestand. And I think of all the things that have happened this year, the home record honestly doesn't shock me that much. This is something we've seen. I'm stunned by now being, 3-11 in games decided by 5 points or less. And that is just a season's difference maker. If that record is flipped around, we're talking about a completely different team.
Yeah, and I think it's getting to 50-50 balls. It's defensive, just defensive mishaps, or a lot of times Mike Brown will point to, you know, we let a guy get too comfortable earlier in the game, and then he's feeling good for the clutch moments. I think we saw that with D'Angelo Russell recently, or Jamal Murray had a big game against Denver after he had a pretty slow most of his season. But you know, the offensive execution, I thought, has actually felt fine for the most part. There's the Denver game, DeMar just kind of drops the ball, and there's instances like that are just unfortunate and going to happen throughout a season. But last night, De'Aaron hit a pretty big clutch shot to take them up 3, and then obviously what ended up happening afterwards. But it's so many of these moments where, especially as you mentioned, having 2 of the most clutch guys in the league, you expect it to look so much differently, but it's a lack of execution defensively, chasing after 50-50 balls, limiting offensive rebounds late in the clutch, and just staying fully engaged. I mean, unfortunately, the fouling a 3-point shooter and giving them a 4-point play when you're up 3 is kind of representative, I feel like, of what's been their issues in the clutch. It's attention to detail and just not shooting yourself in the foot, really.
Yeah, yesterday, Brenden, we talked to Sam, and Sam, you know, I kind of asked about the hot seat for a guy like Mike Brown, a guy like Monty McNair, and He said, usually you get a little bit of rumbling somewhere, some smoke, and hearing about potential replacements. And, according to Sam's intel, like he didn't really feel like much was very warm at all based on even with the results. Now, the Pacer game paired with this one certainly isn't a good look for the team. And if it keeps going down this road, I kind of agree with you that, look, all things could be in play. But I think for now, this is kind of the squad they got, and they're going to go at it until they make it any kind of change.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. I think that there has to be something big that happens in my mind. And I think that could mean a wide variety of things, but whether that's trying to get better at this trade deadline and convincing De'Aaron to stay, it almost feels like the real conceivable path to keeping him at this point is hoping that he makes all NBA, which that already feels like a little bit of a shot in the dark and low odds that could pull off. But what is enough to convince him to stay, and how much are you mortgaging your future in order to do so, only to potentially be in a worse spot if De'Aaron were to walk away? Or, like, I think front office is somebody that I would point towards a lot in the construction of this roster, the imbalance, lack of links forwards. It's been the case for years, as I'm sure you're aware of, Jason. But are you going to move on from a front office a month before a trade deadline? Like, that doesn't make much sense. But then at the same time, if you're unsure about them, are you okay with allowing them to trade De'Aaron Fox? I also think if you move on from Mike Brown, it wouldn't surprise me if that is also spelling the end for De'Aaron Fox, but maybe we're already at that point. So it's a lot of different potential paths that I think this could kind of go down. But I think the one thing I feel pretty sure of is that something needs to change, and Devin Carter coming back potentially this weekend is not turning this season around. And even on nights where you're shooting the ball well, like they did against Detroit, they kind of just feel a little bit broken. And like there's something that needs to change, I think, in this locker room and just sort of the energy around this team.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Carter. I don't know how he'll be used. I think he's a guy that can help this team, but, it is a smaller team that has a surplus of guards. So obviously if he gets into the rotation somewhere, it will hurt a combination of Fox, Monk, Herter, DeRozan, Ellis. Like, how do you eventually, when he's right in playing or available, how do you envision them using him?
I think last night it's easy to plug him into, for example, like the Colby Jones minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that also could eat into potentially a little bit of Keon's minutes, or I'm a little more hesitant to say Kevin Herter, but that would probably be the next person I would consider on that list. Maybe DeMar DeRozan. I think Devin's about 6'2", but he does have a 6'8" wingspan. He has a vertical identical to Malik Monk, at least at both of their combines. I bet you Malik would say that he wasn't really trying in that for what it's worth. But, good length, size, athleticism, I think even at that 6'2" mark plays a lot bigger than you would think. So I think we're going to see a lot of three-guard lineups. I think we've already been starting to see that, but DeMar DeRozan at the 4, Keegan Murray playing the 4 a lot, obviously, and some three-guard lineups, some of De'Aaron, Devin, and Malik, for example, or a lot of Kevin Herter playing that 3 since he's got a little bit more size at 6'7". But I think early on, you want to ease them into things. To me, I was definitely looking at the Colby Jones minutes last night and thinking, all right, it's pretty easy to imagine Devin taking these.
Well, the next offering is tomorrow in LA. They're trying to avoid the season sweep by the Lakers, which obviously won't land well if that happens. Got to get out of this losing streak and then back home after that. I know we'll see you a little bit later in this show, Brenden. Thank you for your time. Keep up your great work, and we'll chat with you in a little bit in studio.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, fellas.
All right.
See you in a bit.
Thank you. That's Brenden Nunes, who has a busy day ahead of him. He'll be filling in for Alan Stiles. All right. Our thanks to Brenden. When we come back, we'll break down the final 3 minutes.